welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Dr. Anna Ranieri, speaking about how you can help others while simultaneously taking care of yourself without guilt. Anna Ranieri is an executive coach, career counselor, and an accomplished speaker. As a Yale literature major who got an MBA and worked in corporate settings, Anna became interested in how people work together in organizations. She later retrained herself and has enjoyed her work as a psychotherapist, career counselor, and executive coach. Recently, she's taken to writing, co-authoring the book, How Can I Help? What You Can and Can't Do to Counsel a Friend, Colleague, or Family Member with a Problem, and writing articles on work and management for the Harvard Business Review, as well as making contributions to journalists' pieces and personal and professional development to share with their readers. Anna's next project is to co-author a book called Connecting the Dots, Telling the Story That Will Advance Your Career. Anna, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
Yes, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And audience, welcome. We have Anna Ranieri with us, and I know this is going to be a fabulous show. So, Anna, please give our listeners a taste of your personal story. I think that will be enlightening for them. And also, can you give them a brief overview of what brought you and your co-author to write How Can You Help?
All right. I'm happy to do that. Well, I could start out with the fact that my mother allowed me in college to pursue my interests, which is around reading and writing. So while she really wished I had done something involving math or science, I majored in literature. And that has really come to inform my life. Certainly it's been satisfying in my personal life of being able to read and enjoy books, but also it has come around later in life to doing some writing myself. As Christine mentioned, my professional trajectory has been from being a professional fundraiser right out of college, a way of making some money while determining what to do next. Then after getting my MBA, working in the world of marketing, in the corporate world, and then moving on to becoming interested in psychology, going back to school to get my PhD, and then working with people both in corporate and private settings. As I was doing so, I happened to be at a dinner party with some very lovely people and was sitting next to someone I know, who is a brilliant man in his own field. But at that moment, I happened to be talking about something that was going on for me at that time, something I needed to figure out in my own life. And as I told him about it, this very bright man jumped into telling me what to do, what not to do, what he would do, what I should do. And I thought, wow, he hasn't even heard me out. I realized, that I'd been trained in counseling psychology in my master's and PhD, and that not everybody has been learning those skills. The idea of listening to someone, hearing them out, making sure you understand what they're saying, and not giving advice unless you've been asked to. And so I thought, wow, a book that I'd love to write but probably never will would be on that topic. Then I was having lunch with my friend and former colleague, Joe Gurkoff, and I told him, here's this book I'd like to write, but I probably will never get around to it. And I envisioned it as being called How Can I Help? So people who weren't professional counselors could learn counseling skills. Joe went home from lunch, took a look online, and said, wow, there's no book out there like that. Let's do it. And so what we came together with, since we were both people who like to be irreverent, to share our knowledge of things, but do it in a way that's not boring and includes a sense of humor. So we wrote, How Can I Help? What You Can and Can't Do to Counsel a Friend, Colleague, or Family Member with a Problem.
That is some story, Anna. And I have to tell you, while you were talking, I took down a little note, and it says, not giving advice until or unless asked. I thought that was really cute because, how many of us have seen that in a movie where someone just starts giving advice, but in real life, sometimes, a person is looking to vent or it's process, and then where the other person says, well, like if a person says, well, I hate my job, then the person says, why don't you quit? Right? Right? Which is like, well, get out of there, cut it out. And so that can be fun. And now I want to take the thread that you started up, Anna, because I think this is fascinating. We live in a time where, the liberal arts have been kind of looked down upon by some because everything is just job-focused and career-focused. And so people would be telling a young person, go into the STEM fields. Career opportunities remind me of the movie The Graduate, where Benjamin was told plastics. So I want to just ask you briefly, what was it like being a literature major at Yale? And the reason I ask that is because I'm hoping that you'll say, well, one of the main benefits of being a literature major at Yale was, or at least a side benefit, is that New Haven has great pizza, Pepe's Pizza, Sally's Pizza.
Yeah, Yale is a school that traditionally has been very much about the humanities and the arts. It has a school of art, of architecture, of drama, of music, and whether or not you actively participate in those things, it's part of the experience there. And some of the greatest professors in the area of literature teach there. And so it's an opportunity to delve in and enjoy doing what you love to do. However, it doesn't mean that becomes your career. I knew I would never write the great American novel, but I certainly enjoyed reading some of them. And then, as I say, this issue of reading and writing has come into my life, even in a professional way more recently.
Great. Anna, I just want to pick up on that thread. Can you tell our audience about your creative writing process? Many people struggle with writing and finding a process that works for them, or many people will report that trying to figure out how to write, depending on the type of writing they want to do, is either difficult or challenging. Can you tell our listeners how you went from the conceptual idea of getting the words right on the page, and whether or not that process was either complex or easy for you and your co-author?
All right. Yes, I do have some things to say about that. One would be, first, you want to have some self-knowledge. Again, I knew that I am not a writer of fiction. I do not have a line of fiction in my whole body. But I do like writing about something that I happen to know, because then it's a process of passing some knowledge on to other people. And so that's one part of it. I knew that what I could write would be nonfiction. Secondly, I grabbed a co-author. When my friend and colleague Joe said, we should write this book, I said, great, because then I knew that would get me going and keep me on track. And I went from, here's the book I'll never write, to, all right, we can do this. We spent a lot of time front-loading this process, and what I mean by that is determining what the focus of the book would be. There are lots of things you can write about on the topic of helping others, and we realized you can't squeeze it all into one book. So we spent a lot of time going back and forth on what do we want the content to be and how can we narrow it down to those things we most want to write about and that we think would be most helpful to people. Having been a marketing person in the past, I put together a little group of people to hear about our plans and to give their opinion on what they thought was important. That was very useful to us, too, and we kept that going as we worked on the book. What do you think about this idea? What do you think about this way of portraying things? What do you think about this cover? And it's surprising what knowledge you can get that way, which helps you move forward. And then I had in mind some things I learned when I was in graduate school. When I was ready to write my dissertation, a young woman who was a class above me in finishing had recommended some things for getting that dissertation done. One of the things she shared was the idea of sitting down for 20 minutes, saying to yourself, I'm going to work for 20 minutes. That way, you can't lose. Either you're having a bad day and all you want to put in is those 20 minutes, but now you're 20 minutes ahead. What often happens is you get working and, 20 minutes come and go and you're still really engaged, and so you're producing a lot more. One of the books I often recommend to my clients who are writing for whatever reason is the book Bird by Bird by the author Anne Lamott. She talks about how to sit down as a writer, and she's a prolific writer, very successful, and get that process started. She has a chapter in the book, and I cannot express on the air the adjective she uses to talk about first draft. So I'll just say she calls it something like lousy first draft. And what she's saying there is put something down on paper, or these days, of course, onto your computer. Put something down that gives you that start. That's a shot fired over the bow that says, I've started this process. You can come back to it and realize, ooh, that's got to be edited a whole lot, but at least I'm on my way. And the other thing I recommend for people is writing classes. If you feel like there's some information you really want to write about, something you know in your personal or professional life that you want to share with others, but you're not sure about how to best do that, take some writing classes, learn from the experts, practice, and get feedback, and that can help you go on your way.
Well, Anna, I thank you for that. And when you talk about feedback, that what comes to my mind is that we know this from personal experience. When a person is writing something, whether it's an article or a book chapter, that there are many people that have the fear of having someone see their writing in an incomplete state, or I should say an incomplete state. And so there are actually books written about that, and that's at all levels. And then what I wanted to add to that is that, and this has come up in other podcasts we've done. We did a podcast with Hillary Reddick, who wrote about writing perfectionism and procrastination. And one of the things that she talks about is support, having, people that are encouraging you. And so we actually know people who have gone to a writer's group, some type of event we're supposed to be supportive, and they, brought their 5 pages or 8 pages, and the people just shredded their stuff, and in a couple of cases, in a couple of examples, we know these are people that are already published authors, very successful, and that negative criticism stopped them in their tracks, and they stopped writing.
That's too bad. That's very sad, because let's face it, nobody is perfect, but we want to delve into something and keep learning. And if what we need to do is learn to write better, we can do it if somebody encourages us and helps to show us how. And that's why I think that, official classes on writing can be useful there, because you're probably going to find a very accomplished writer teaching those classes and encouraging you to get it right, too.
Yeah, I think also Christine was in a group, the Success Team, with Barbara Scheer, and I believe in the next to the last meeting, I think it's an 8-week session or something.
It's an 8-week process, yeah.
Right, that they have this thing called an idea party, and everyone goes around and they can only give positive feedback. And so that's why I brought that issue up, because for some people, they can be stalled for a very long time. I'm talking years, by someone, they get slammed, and when their idea is still in a fragile state. So I agree with you, taking the classes, but hopefully you could be in a supportive atmosphere.
Yes, that's a good point. If you're in a writing group where people do support each other, that can be important too. And catching somebody doing something right is what I always urge my clients to do if they're in a management role or in a role like that. Catch somebody doing something right and start out by commending them for that. Then, next, what else can they learn to do to make it better?
Thank you, Anna. That is so lovely. That is one of my favorite practices, catch someone doing something right. I think so many of us could practice doing that more often. And thank you for sharing your writing process. As I listened to you, it occurred to me, and we don't always think of it, that writing is a performance art because you're producing this thing, and it's going to be shown and seen and presented. While it's not necessarily live on stage, it's going to be presented. Somebody's going to be looking at you. And then, there's that little possible edge of criticism. Now, Anna, just going a little further, in your own life, as all of us, you've encountered challenges. And in your work, in your personal life, how do you deal with that and how do you resolve it? And in doing so, how important is your own self-care in the equation? Bob and I often find that people who are compassionate and giving in helping others, they tend to put themselves on the back burner, not take care of themselves. Why is it so hard for some people to be good receivers and to really engage in self-care?
I think, Christine, this is a great question, and it's a really important issue. One of the things I'm always sharing with my students, my clients, my friends, is the idea of the oxygen mask. This is around what we hear if we travel by plane. They get to the point where they're telling you the safety measures, and they say, in the unlikely event of a loss of cabin pressure, if you're traveling with small children, please be sure to put your own oxygen mask on first and then turn to assist them. If we're in a plane and we're thinking about that, we're likely to say, well, that makes good sense. You can't, help somebody else to breathe if you're not breathing yourself. And in an emergency, we see that that's really important. But in everyday life, I think we can lose sight of that. We're so busy helping others, and this happens to people who are professional helpers, teachers, psychologists, managers, you name it. It also happens to people who just tend to be the good helpers, the good listeners that everybody flocks to. And so one of the things that we want to remember in everyday life is that we have to put on that oxygen mask. We have to make sure we get the oxygen we need so that we can help others, too, to go through difficult times.
Yeah, very much so. What are some of the things that you do, or what are the best ways that you could recommend that we do take our oxygen? As you spoke, it occurred to me that I said, wait a minute, I think I was guilty of that. Was it just yesterday morning or this morning? Because I myself, I'll glance out at nature. Bob and I, we love going to the beach, but, we've taken that off our list. What are some of the things that are, oxygen-giving practices?
That's a really good point, too. And one of the things that I recommend is that people ask themselves, what most nourishes me? What do I need to make sure I have in my life to feel balanced? Whether it means spending some time in daily exercise, or whether it means playing or listening to music. The kinds of things that, really get you feeling in sync with yourself and in sync with life. You don't want to run them off the calendar. In fact, you want to make sure that they are on the calendar and they are scheduled like actual meetings or obligations. You determine, okay, each morning I need a little exercise. That's going to happen at this time and in this place and so on. Put it in the calendar so that you take care of yourself, and then you've got that ability to get to work and to help friends and others because you have accessed what you need in your life too. You want to take that as seriously as any other kind of obligation, and when you do, you'll be glad that you've sort of recreated that balance.
Excellent. I really like that, Anna. Thank you so much. You know, Anna, one of the themes of your book is the number of ways that we're called upon to help others. What is the most important issue or key challenge for a good helper? You know, as you said, the people who tend to give help, people know who they are, so they sort of clamor to them, and they know who not to go to. But what are the ways that we can help and do that well?
This is a really important topic, and what we've done with our book, How Can I Help, is to help see people through the process of helping, to know that they can engage in that process or not. They can get away from it at any point where it becomes clear that this isn't the job for them, as they help that friend or colleague or family member. So we talk about what is the process of helping. And one of the things we really emphasize in the book is sometimes it's just listening to someone. We don't have to even go any further than that. Very rarely in life do people enjoy the luxury of being listened to. If you think about the average conversation as people, run past each other at work, it's, hey, how are you doing? Fine. How about you? Fine. And that's it. Taking that time and opportunity to sit and listen to somebody can really make a difference for them. And having felt heard, that may be all they need. They are letting off steam. They are considering some options for themselves. They can go from there. And maybe being a good listener is as far as you need to take it. Sometimes, though, it can be useful if you help that friend or colleague or family member to determine what their goals are around the problem they have. You don't have to do that. You don't have to create their goals. You want to just encourage them to feel like they're taking that next step in making a positive change in their lives. So helping them determine what to do next can be the way in which you really help. At some point, you may have to confront someone that you've spent time and effort helping because they've reached out, they've told you they were distressed about a situation in their life, but you realize that, wait a minute, they've been talking about this for a long time. They haven't been doing anything about it themselves. I can't change their lives. They need to change that. So sometimes it's time to confront them. And this is the most popular chapter in our book, confrontation, because let's face it, we all fear confrontation. We can think that's about, a nasty kind of an argument. Confrontation, though, and this is where psychotherapists like ourselves can help describe this, it's really about making an observation, being able to say to that friend, hey, I have to tell you, I've heard you talking for a long time about your desire to make this change in your life, but you haven't taken action. Well, at some level, they know that that's true. And it may be that they say, you know what, you're right. I really do need to stop whining and get to work. On the other hand, you have to be ready for the confrontation that ends up with them saying, well, what do you know? I don't think you're helping me at all. And that might be an exit from the helping process or even from a friendship. That is where you have to remember that you're not helping them by continuing to allow them to complain without taking action. But you want to know, if you're going to confront somebody, that it could end in their anger. And that may be the point at which you say, well, I think I remind my friend or my colleague or my family member that they need to get some outside help, some professional help that may move them past that part of the process. It is important to know what we as helpers can do if we're not professional helpers, and where it is important to refer somebody or help them refer themselves to a professional. And one of the things we emphasize, too, in the book is that in order to help someone, you want to evaluate where you stand on three things. Do you have the time to help? Do you have the desire to help? And do you have the relationship with someone where it's appropriate to help? We all know those times you sit down on a bus or an airplane and someone sits down next to you and starts telling you their life story and some big problem they're wrestling with. You could decide, well, I don't have a relationship with that person, but for the duration of this bus trip or this plane trip, I have the time, I'll help them. But again, that's an assessment you want to make and make your decision.
Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate the clarity and the strength of that statement. And I think it was really fantastic the way you presented the concept of confrontation. So listeners, we'll be back in a moment to hear more from Dr. Anna Ranieri on Learn to Live Stress-Free.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free as we continue our conversation with our featured guest today, Dr. Anna Ranieri.
Anna, before the break, you said so many interesting things, and I could see our listeners sitting up, almost like a dog with its ears would perk up. I mean, one of the things that you said the luxury of being listened to. And I was thinking of the fact how although that's true, I was thinking about how sad that really is. That if you think about, people going through their days or going through their life, just rushing around and not being able to give their full attention, and then other people not giving their attention to them. And so Christine from time to time has reminded me, she said, Bob, you're one of the few people when you're talking to someone, you give them 100% of your attention, and they can often feel that. She said, but most people, you've got 15 balls in the air, and they're talking to you, but they're thinking about, I have to pick up the cleaners at 6 o'clock. The babysitter's got to leave while they're talking to you, and I'm only 20 feet from the restroom. So I think this thing of what you said, instead of, it just amazes me sometimes because many people have very serious things going on, and then you ask them, how are you, and they're saying, fine, as you said. And so what do you think about that as a therapist and as a coach? That I know you most likely will say, of course there are times when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. But what about this issue of the fact that you're saying it's a luxury? That's what I keyed in on, because, and I know you can handle it, Anna, because you're a literature major.
Well, it's true that in our current lives, we are all busy dashing around in lots of other directions, making sure we read our email and responded to the latest text and so on. So in real life, having a conversation that involves sitting down for a while and just listening can be pretty rare. The other thing I think that comes into it is that we sometimes, as helpers, we hear the pain of somebody who's telling us about a problem and we want to fix it right away. We don't want them to continue to be distressed or in pain. So we start, combing our own head for what are some ideas to give them? How can I give them that advice that'll help? How did I solve that problem when I had it 2 years ago? And before you know it, we're saying, all right, do this, just like my dinner partner, and finding that that's not the best response. It takes a lot of effort to just sit and listen. This is something that psychotherapists have to be trained to do because our impulse is jump right in and start helping now. In our book, we make fun of ourselves because we do like humor. The typical psychotherapist listening and nodding and leaning forward and so on, but not saying anything yet. And that, is a little bit of a joke around psychotherapists, but it also works because you're showing somebody, I'm engaged, I'm listening, I'm not telling you what to do, I am just hearing you out. And that's pretty rare.
Right. So, Anna, thank you for that, and I know our audience appreciates your answer. When I started reading your book and seeing the Amazon reviews, as an author, everyone's concerned about reviews, and you want to get great reviews. And so one of the first things I did was go to your site on Amazon to take a look and see what people were saying about your books. And so as I read the reviews, I said, oh, this is great. People are saying they are being helped. Can you tell our audience how rewarding a feeling is that for you to see that you and your co-author have written a book that's making a difference in people's lives, where they're saying things like, I read your book and I have an elder care situation and I'm able to apply that. How rewarding is that for you, Anna?
We are very pleased with that outcome. We hadn't foreseen it, really. We were writing a book about helping others, and we quickly found people saying, this helped me consider how to help myself. Now, my daughter was the first one to do this. She had a friend at the time who was going through a difficult phase in life, and my daughter said, hey, can I see that manuscript you're working on, about how to help others? She read it in order to think about ways to help her friend, and then she said, Mom, this really helped me consider something I want to change in my life and how to get at it. So that started the ball rolling. And then we have found that our readers often gift the book to family members or friends. So they don't just buy a copy for themselves, they buy copies for others, not only in terms of how their friends can help others, but how their friends can help themselves. If the original reader has found that they've got a friend who's having a difficult time in life. And it is the same process, just as you look at the steps to helping another, listening, helping that person to create some goals, confronting them if they're not working on those goals, recommending professional help if it's needed. And then one of the things we talk about, too, in terms of helping others is when to exit from the helping process. Those steps are the same when you're helping yourself. You want to first kind of listen to, what am I worried about exactly? How do I narrow it down to something that I can manageably address or have some control over? Then how do I set some realistic goals, not pie in the sky, but something I can reasonably approach that will make a difference in my life? Sometimes we have to confront ourselves and say to ourselves, hey, you've been complaining about this problem that you've experienced at work or in a relationship or somewhere else. I don't see you doing anything about it. So we have to sort of read ourselves the riot act and say, come on, let's get on track and really make something happen.
Yeah, very definitely. It's important to keep ourselves out of that stuck place. Now, Anna, it seems that you and Joe had a great deal of fun doing this work together. What would you say are the main benefits that, two professional psychotherapists, career counselors, your executive coach here, teaming up can bring to your readers? And how might this work for people in other professions?
I think for us, what was really helpful was that the two of us are different in some ways. In our writing styles, for example, I tend to be very telegraphic, and that means I'm going to say something in as few words as possible. So Joe was very helpful in assuring that we expanded on a thought so we don't lose somebody. Somebody reading it and says, what does that mean? They need more information. Joe, on the other hand, tends to add lots of detail, and sometimes it's felt as if we didn't have room for that. So I'd be the person that says, Joe, I think we got to cut back on that. We can't say everything here. So because we came from a different approach to writing, I think we found a really happy medium in the book in terms of how to express what we wanted to get across to our readers. I think, too, just in terms of our experience, even though we both had worked in the business world and both worked as psychotherapists and career counselors, it's also true that we had different kinds of insights from different specific experiences we'd had, so we were able to weave some of my stories and Joe's stories together to have a richer number of examples for our readers.
Wonderful. Bob and I, as we've worked together over the years, we experienced that too, because stylistically we're different in several ways, and we've seen how we've positively, I believe, influenced each other's writings. Anna, in your own life, outside of the office, you talk about a generativity process. Could you speak a little bit about that and what that has meant to you and how that plays out in other people's lives?
Sure. One way of looking at the process of life or the progress of life that psychologically has been bandied about for a long time is this idea of these stages of life and what we typically would want to accomplish during those stages of life. And one is that adult stage, and that's a pretty long one. We're adults for a long time. What we try to do, if we're going to fully live that stage, is to generate, hence the name generativity, generate what outcomes we want to see in life, whether it is early adulthood and it might be finding your initial path professionally and or relationships and or starting a family if you choose, etc. Later in life, during one's professional and personal life, one can be looking at, all right, what am I creating and how does it contribute to the world? And so one of the things I did recently was I was attending a college reunion, and I was asked to lead a panel to be called Our Third Act. And, of course, I said, yeah, I'll lead the panel if we can agree that there'll be a fourth act. And I was able to work with two of my classmates on that. Terrence Dunn, who is a man who has done very well in the financial world and the world of film. He's creative and he's a good business person. But at this stage, he has moved towards sharing his knowledge, very deep knowledge of Tai Chi with other people in order to improve their lives. Also on the panel is my classmate Julia Schlam-Edelman. She is an OBGYN in practice, and she has written a book called Menopause Matters, Your Guide to a Long and Healthy Life. She is now sharing her knowledge to women in all the stages of adulthood and helping them to understand how to maintain good health. So what I've seen is that with various approaches, with Terry's approach, with Julia's approach, with my increased writing and teaching on topics I know something about, we feel like we are sharing our skills and our experience and what we've learned with others. And it is very satisfying. It is something that is important because as you look at where you want to take your career or your life, and you approach a certain point in life where you might, for example, be considering retirement or might consider doing something very different than you've done before, you certainly don't want to look back and say, ooh, if only I'd done more in this profession, or if only I had written about that topic, or if only I had tried to get the word out to people. You want to make sure that you are in that generativity stage that can continue well into later adulthood, too. You may be retired, but you're now, for example, choosing to help people in a different way. You may not be working in the industry you were very successful in, but now you are choosing something that you want to be sure to be able to do.
Great, Anna. I thank you for that, and I know the answer that you gave has given an additional level of clarity to our listeners, and clarity is really important because it often helps us target in on exactly what it is that we want to do. So as we begin to wrap up our conversation here, Anna, I want to ask you, how have you found, as a therapist and, as a mother, as a teacher, a writer, how have you found, or what can you recommend to our listeners that they could use to, once they have the clarity about what it is that they want, to be able to say no without guilt? Because I know some people, for some people, that is an issue that looms large. You're busy doing other things. You're asked to volunteer here, to serve on this board, to do this, or, even to make the cupcakes at church or anything like that. And I forget who it is that says, by saying, was it Linda Story, NLP coach from the West Coast of Canada, she has this motto. She says, by saying yes to this, am I saying no to what I really want? And I think, so could you just address that, how once you have clarity, or the flip side is that when you don't have clarity, you may be saying yes to so many things that would drain you and not even allow you to get to the point of clarity so that you know what it is that you want to do and accomplish.
Well, that's a really interesting issue that I learned about when I was in graduate school. I was getting my PhD at Stanford, and one of my professors was Carl Thorson. You can see how I'm passing along now things I learned from others who passed them on to us. Carl was one of the first persons to work in the area of health psychology, and therefore he was very much in demand. People would call him all the time and say, hey, could you speak at this conference? Could you be on board for this activity and so on? We'd really love to have you there. And he realized at some point, well, you can't do everything. And he was finding himself pulled in too many directions. So what he realized was he had to practice saying no. And so this has to do with men's clothing, in that men more often than not have a pocket on their shirt. Women's clothing doesn't always allow for that. But what he learned to do was take a 3x5 card and write on it 3 or 4 different ways to say no. Keep that card in his pocket at all times initially. And so when somebody called with a request, he could pull it out of his pocket and say, reading it, he could say, oh, no, thank you very much for that honor, but I can't be there. And stop right there. And what he was learning, and so what he found was that by leaving out the excuse, the way we feel like, well, we got to describe that we can't do it because, just say no and thank you. And the person ultimately may be disappointed, but they will then go on to the next person. And so as he practiced with his 3x5 card, he found it easier to do because no one yelled at him or said, what's the matter with you, or you must be there. They simply said, well, thank you very much. We understand that you're a busy person. We hope we'll have another opportunity. End of conversation. So after a while, he didn't have to carry the 3x5 card anymore. He had learned to do that for himself. So saying no takes practice. When we find that we can set limits, we can say no. The occasional person will get angry and feel like, we have to be available to them 24/7. but most people will be reasonable and say, of course, good for you, to take care of your own life. The other thing I think is important in doing this is to create your own timetable. What do you have in terms of obligations regarding work, regarding kids, regarding elderly parents, regarding community duties, etc. There's where you want to, realistically look at what's possible on your calendar, get it in there, and be realistic. At this time, I'm very engaged, for example, somebody might say, with a community effort. That means I have to cut back on my ability to be available for this activity I enjoy, but it'll come back into my life as I finish with this one effort and move back towards that one. If we can look at it that way and realize what is actually possible in any given day, then we can see that it is realistic to set aside times for the things we most want at that moment and look at how we can reasonably divvy up that day.
Well, Anna, wow, I just have to tell you that is my reaction to the 3x5 card. I'm going to get me a 5x7 card, a bigger card, because this thing of you're working on something like, trying to finish a book or you have a deadline for an article, a hard deadline, and someone comes to you with it is a reasonable request, but it reminds me of the Peter Sellers movie, Not Now, Juju, not right at this moment. I want to help you. So thank you for that. I'm sure our listeners, really, that is whether or not they use the card or not, but you have addressed this issue of not feeling guilty about it because especially you laid out, you have your schedule. By having your schedule, you say, listen, I'm already doing Pilates, I have PTA, I have mandatory overtime. If you say yes to these requests, you will be on burnout. And so I want to thank you for that, and I know that is helpful to our audience. And so thank you, Anna, for being our featured guest today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
We really enjoyed it, Anna. And as we wind down the show, would you share with our audience the best ways to get in touch with you?
You can certainly see my website, which is www.annaranieri, ANNARANIERI.com. You can also email me, annaranieri@gmail.com. Online, you'll be able to look up HBR, Anna Ranieri, and can read some of the articles I have on working with people. And so I'm happy to hear from people that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So, listeners, if you want to get in touch with Anna, check her out at her website, annaranieri.com, or email her at annaranieri@gmail.com, and that's ANNARANIERI. And do check out her articles on the Harvard Business Review. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Yes, Anna. What final thoughts or key idea would you like our listeners to take away from today's broadcast?
Well, I would say I would want people to think about enjoying the satisfaction of helping others. We certainly, as human beings, enjoy being able to help. But also, remember to help yourself. You deserve help as much as anyone else does, so make sure you have that oxygen mask on. I would also say in terms of this issue of generativity, of considering what we want to make happen in our lives, in our community, through our work and our lives, explore what you want to contribute and when. We can't get to everything at once. Maybe you've got a bucket list of things you'd like to accomplish. Write it down. Keep it in mind for the right time to make that happen.
Wonderful. So, audience, I want to thank you again for listening to our show today. And, Anna, I want to thank you again for being our featured guest today. So, audience, wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this show, and whatever time zone you're in, we certainly appreciate your presence, and we trust that you'll benefit in some way from the information that we delivered during today's podcast show. We welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or a guest you enjoyed so much that you'd like us to invite them back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how to get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.